Hi, my friends. I am here today to talk with you about the oral, the IA, in IB language and literature. There has been some confusion about what the oral is, and I wanted to put it into a presentation for you so I can explain with some visuals and some text as to what the IA is in IB language and literature. So to start, the IA stands for internal assessment. Every IB course has internal assessment and external assessments. There are usually multiple per class. For IB language and literature, the internal assessment is the oral. It is a presentation that you give to me, to your teacher, that is recorded, scored, and then sent to the IB. So I listen, I score it, and then I send it to the IB. That is a part of the assessment for IB language and literature. There are multiple types of external assessment and only one internal assessment, and that internal assessment is the oral. So let's unpack it a little bit. The IB IA, the oral for IB Lang and Lit, I'm going to call it the IA so that way you can get used to that acronym. Sometimes we'll call it the oral in class. It is an oral presentation. Oral means it's spoken. It's a verbal presentation, but I'm going to call it the IA so that way you keep remembering that this is a part of the assessment. So the IA in IB Lang and Lit is all centered around a global issue. The global issue is kind of the biggest factor in the IA. And then as a way of unpacking that global issue, you look at two texts. Extract number 1 must come from a literary text that you have read in class. Literary meaning it's fictional, it's a story. So like the plays that we read by August Wilson, those are literary texts. A novel, The Handmaid's Tale, is a literary text. So a literary text is literature. It's fictional. It's made up. Of course, it's based in reality, but it is not a real. It's not an article. It's not a photograph. The extract has to be 40 lines or fewer. You cannot have more than 40 lines for your IA. If you are using a video, like a movie, then the video that you choose or the movie clip that you choose must be 60 seconds or less with 1 to 2 stills from those 60 seconds. And then if you're using an image, the difficulty with an image, a literary image example would be like a piece of artwork. That would be a visual text. So the key thing is that with both of these extracts and in IB Lang and Lit in general, we always focus on style choices. How do the author or creator's choices tell you something about the global issue? So that's extract 1, and it must connect to the global issue. Then you need extract 2, which must come from a non-literary text. So a non-fiction or a real text, like an article, a documentary, a photograph, an advertisement. It has to be a non-literary text. So it's not a story, it's nonfiction. Same rules guide this one as well. It has to be 40 lines or fewer. If you're working with a film, it's got to be 60 seconds or less with 1 or 2 stills from those 60 seconds. If you're working with images, it's 1 image, limited to 1 image. And again, you're focused on style choices. How do the author or creator's choices tell you something about the global issue? So in kind of a visual form, I just want to show you what this looks like kind of in visual. So the global issue is the centering piece of the IA. The global issue has to be local, has to be something that's felt on a local level. It also has to be something that's felt on a national level and something that's felt on a global level. This is something that people experience here, something that people experience in the UK, something that people experience in Uganda, in Sri Lanka, something that people experience all across the world. And it has to be current. It has to be a global issue that people are facing today. So extract 1, your literary text, you'll have some style devices that you identify in your literary text. The key thing is that each of these style devices are connected to the global issue. How does this style device speak to the global issue of choice? Extract number 2, non-literary text, same thing. 2 to 3 style devices, maybe less, maybe more, depending on your extract and depending on your time. And then all of this connects back to that global issue. How do both texts speak to the global issue in their style choices? So it's not in their content. It's not, you're not focused on the central argument here, or you could focus on the central claim or the repetition of that claim in the passage. But the key thing is that IB language and literature is always focused on how does language, how does the author choices build to a deeper meaning? So how do both texts speak to the global issue in their style choices? So I'm going to show you an example of this. And if you watched the video that's in our module for this week, then you already are familiar with these two texts. So the global issue is disability rights. That is local, something that people feel here and now today. It is national, something that people are experiencing on a national level in the United States. It is also global. Access, disability rights when it comes to education, all of the, anything to do with disability rights is a global issue. So it's a broad issue. However, when I'm giving my my IA, I can zoom in on the different pieces of disability rights that each text speaks to. So extract number 1, literary text must be fiction or a story. The Reason I Jump by Naoki Higashida. This is a print text, so I have to pull less than 40 lines. I just pulled 20 lines because I don't need 40 lines. That's too much. And I'm going to focus on simile, pathos, and syntax because that's what I identified in the passage. And then my key question is, how does the author's use of simile, pathos, and syntax say something about disability rights? Extract number 2 is my non-literary text. This is the non-fiction or the real text. And my text number 2 is the documentary Crip Camp, a disability rights movement documentary. And I chose 45 seconds from the film, which included 4 lines of text and 2 stills or images from the film. And my focus are pathos and the music. So how does the author's use of pathos and music say something about disability rights? I want to point out that neither of these use, so simile and syntax are really the only 2 that come from diddles. Simile would fall under the L for language, and syntax would fall under the S for syntax and structure. But pathos and music are both style choices that don't fall in diddles. So keep that in mind, that diddles, D-I-D-L-E-L-S, diction, imagery, details, language, and syntax and structure. Diddles is a way to enter into any text. You might not focus on something that falls into those categories. The key thing is that you are focused on the author or creator choices and how those choices say something about your global issue. So, what does the oral look like? In the oral, you will give 10 minutes of a presentation. You'll present your ideas for 10 minutes. In those 10 minutes, you're first going to describe your global issue. How is this local, national, and global and current? Then you're going to summarize both texts. Now, this is a tough one because for some of you, you might be pulling an image that's a part of a larger body of images. Or you might be pulling an article that is a part of a larger body of work. You need to summarize that whole body of work. So if you're focused on Caitlin Flanagan's articles, you're going to summarize how all of her articles speak to and complicate the #MeToo movement. If you're focused on a photograph by Charles Moore, you're going to talk about all of those 5 photographs by Charles Moore and what are kind of the key themes and issues in those 5 photographs. If your text is a novel or a play, you're going to tell us what that novel or play is all about. Ma Rainey is all about, and then summarize it for us. You need to briefly summarize both texts. So tell us what they're both about. Then you need to provide your thesis statement. Your thesis statement for the IA must connect both texts to the global issue. So it'll be something like in The Reason I Jump by Naoki Higashida and Crip Camp, both texts speak to the global issue of disability rights through their style choices. specifically pathos, syntax, simile, and I forgot my other one. But you're going to preview your central argument by naming the global issue, stating both texts, and previewing the style choices that you're going to focus on in your oral. Then you're going to present on one extract. How does the author's style choices speak to your global issue in one extract? Present on the other extract. How does the creator's style choices speak to the other extract, or speak to the global issue in the other extract? Please remember, you must spend equal time on both extracts. If you spend a ton of time on your literary extract and you hardly spend any time on your non-literary extract, you will lose significant points. And then you conclude by repeating your thesis statement, by connecting back to that global issue. And it's always a good idea to connect to the impact on people today. Why should we care about disability rights? Why should we care about your global issue? And then once you're done with that 10-minute presentation, there will be 5 minutes of questions from your teacher, from me. This is the key thing about these questions. These questions are meant to help you score higher than how you would have scored if you had just done those 10 minutes. So if you tell me in your thesis statement that you're going to focus on the simile in one text, and then you don't end up saying anything about that simile, one of my questions might be, can you unpack the simile that you mentioned and tell me a little bit more about that? So my goal will be to help you get more points, to help you explain your ideas further. So then, what's the mock IA all about? Because right now you're working on a mock IA. You're not working on the final IA just yet. The mock IA is practice. You're practicing the process of finding your extracts, annotating your extracts, and creating your presentation notes. So you're not recording your IA, you're not giving the presentation, but you're practicing that process of creating the IA. When are we going to practice the oral? When are we going to practice the actual presentation part? At the end of the semester, you're going to practice, and then we're going to record your final oral at the end of the semester in April or May. So the priority in our practice will be to first decide which IA you want to do. Because at the end of the year, you might not like any of the 3 mock IAs that you made. You might decide to do something totally different. You might decide to connect Handmaid's Tale to the photographs that we're going to be looking at in marking period 3. Or you might decide to connect Ma Rainey to Caitlin Flanagan. You can decide how you want to create your IA. So just bear in mind that we will practice the oral toward the end of the semester. And remember, when you're stuck, ask for help. I'm here to support you, but I cannot read your mind. Please ask for help when you need it. All right, my friends, get to it. You've got this.